Welcome to the No BS Human Design Podcast. I'm Adriana Keefe, human design coach and motivational speaker. I went through my quarter life crisis in my 20s and had to learn how to navigate through finding what I was meant to be doing with my life. I refused to believe in the culture that said we were all meant to have the same path and boring careers until we retire and die. And along my journey, I found human design, a system that reveals your energetic blueprint, showing you where and how to access your body's consciousness and how to live as your true self. Human design changed my life, so I started sharing it with others and changing their lives, but we were all finding the same problem: a lack of resources that explain the system in easy and useful ways. So I created this show where we dive deep into the lessons of the human design system without the BS and the noise you find on the internet. Listen in for lessons in human design, finding your purpose, manifestation and spiritual practices, human design within business, and so much more. We connect with other experts in the human design and spiritual realm in a refreshingly honest way to help you find your way along your spiritual path and live this life with intention. It's time to let go of the societal expectations of being and let yourself find abundance through being uniquely you. Let's get started. Hey, beautiful soul. Welcome back to another episode of the No BS Human Design Podcast. This past week, I decided to put into one of the communities I'm in the question of, what questions do you have about human design? Because I was finding myself at this point of lacking of creative inspiration. And I really wanted to make a few episodes for the podcast. So I'm like, I know what community to put this in. And I put it in that community. And then it was like a whirlwind of questions. So I've got content for like days on days. And one of the biggest ones that I saw come up a few times in a few different ways was the best way to communicate, or communication between types, especially around sacral and non-sacral energy. So when I think of communication, it's yes about asking the questions, like how do we ask each other questions? How do we verbalize these things? But it's also about how does our energy communicate with each other and what can we do to support one another? So how can I support them? How can they support me? And remember, it's our responsibility to teach people how we want to be related to or how we want to be interacted with. So, yes, in human design, I talk a lot about giving other people grace. And it's also important to know that most people in the world, you are one of the few people who actually wants to live life by something like human design. So you're one of the very few people who actually has this knowledge, and most people won't know your type or how to ask you questions or how to treat you. So while I can give you this knowledge of how it's best for you to ask other people things and whatever, it's also really important to remember that it's your responsibility to teach people how to treat you, right? So taking that into your own hands and restructuring or reframing relationships that you're finding like they don't feel good because that communication feels like a big disconnect, right? So remember that as we go through the different types and talk about communication and interaction with one another. All right, so let's just dive in. You might want a pen and paper for this one because I'm going to go through each of the aura types and talk about like literally like how to ask each other questions. But I'm also going to talk about how this knowledge can help you with your kids. You may have heard me say before that, I have 3 kids that are all different types. Thankfully, 2 of them are generator types. One's a generator and one's a manifesting generator. So that makes it a little bit easier, but they still, there's just a lot of different energy operating in this house. The only type we don't have is a projector. But thankfully, I know plenty of projectors, plenty of projector kids, so I can still tell you how you can support them in the way that you ask questions and communicate with them and support them. So, big obvious one that we'll start with first, because we are about 70% of the population, are the generator types. So this is the generators and the manifesting generators. We are, quote, sacral beings, and we respond using that sacral center from our body graph or in our body. So it's easiest for us to respond in yes or no ways. If you have done much work on your generator type or the sacral center, you'll know what I'm talking about when it comes to that gut response. If you ask a generator type an open-ended question, it can feel really frustrating. It can feel like you just can't think of even how to answer the question, especially with an open head and ajna. That's me. I'm like completely open up there. And even if my husband is like, where do you want to go for dinner or what do you want to have for dinner? I literally, like, I can't think of anything. You have to give me options. And giving that option, one at a time so that I can answer in my body, yes or no, or taking those options myself one at a time and answering yes or no. So, like, we will use a lot of meal kits in our house to make our lives easier. And if you've ever gotten the meal kit, you see that it comes with like the recipe card, right? So each day I would go through, if I was the one cooking, if not, it's typically my husband that does this. And I'd look at each of the recipe cards and I'd look at the picture and ask my body, like, is this something that I want right now? And let my body answer with yes or no. And then I'd move on to the next one. It's gotten to be like a much faster process now because I've just built that muscle up in my body. But at first, maybe it is like taking each question, taking each recipe card, whatever it is, one at a time, and feeling into your body and asking yes or no, and ask other people to ask you yes or no questions, right? So it's for you to ask yourself. It's to ask people to reframe in a yes or no format. They don't even have to know about human design in order for you to ask them to do this. It's not weird to just be like, sorry, can you reframe that so that I can answer yes or no really quick? Like, let me feel into this and just say yes or no. Now, with generators, specifically generators, another way you can support them is encouraging them to finish their projects, allow them to follow through on the projects that they start. That's a piece of their energy that's like really important for them. It's really hard for them to walk away from something that's unfinished. um, my husband is a generator, and you might have heard me say this before too, but there's been many projects around the house that he's like working on something, but we had a newborn and many other kids. Like, we have 3 kids, so we've gone through this a few times, and I need him to stop doing something in order to help me. Like, maybe the baby's crying or this is happening or whatever. And it used to be so hard to peel him away from whatever he was working on. And I think it's still hard for him to stop, but now, since he's been a parent for so long, he understands that like he's also a parent and he has to get up and help me with things. But it was really difficult for him to be able to peel himself away from something he was working on. And now I also have the knowledge to give him the space to go back and finish something because I know it's literally like eating away at him. So like if he really wants to finish like a work thing on a Friday night where it's typically like us together doing something, I'm like, you're not going to be able to like rest and just like hang out until you do this. So why don't you just go do it? And it provides a lot more energetic alignment for both of us. And then for manifesting generators, remember, they have a lot of different interests and they might not finish things that they start. So, excuse me. So encourage them to have many different interests and allow themselves to explore and allow them to let go of things that don't feel like they're in alignment anymore. That's really important. I'm so thankful that in my marriage, my husband has always encouraged me when I've pivoted. When I left the veterinary world, went into research, but then I was like, I need to pivot and I want to go into real estate. Like, all of these. And then I left real estate and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I think I want to go into interior design. And then I did, but then COVID hit and like all this wild stuff, right? So I've been very thankful that he's always encouraged me during those pivots. Doesn't mean he hasn't questioned me. There have been a few times where he's like, okay, but like, where are we going with this? And thankfully, I finally landed on like the general idea of what I'm spending my life doing. But again, it's going to be different iterations of me all the time because we are non-linear beings. So find yourself people who will encourage you to do multiple things or take on new tasks or whatever it is. And also give you that safe space to be able to talk about like finding a new path or finding a pivot, or that you just can get bored of things and that's okay, right? Like find people who will appreciate that about you and continue to support you either way. Now, if your kids are generator types, it's really helpful to ask them, again, yes or no questions. So ask what I do with my kids is I'll ask them like how excited they feel about something in their belly when it comes to like my daughter, my 5-year-old was like, I don't know if I want to do cheerleading or dance. And she was really back and forth for a little while. And then so I kept asking, well, from your belly, like, do you feel excited about this one? And she was like, yeah, cheerleading. Yeah. And then, of course, mom fail. I didn't sign up in time and missed the cutoff. So she's in dance, but thankfully, she is my super sweet, empathic little 5-year-old. And she's like, it's okay, mom. We'll do it next year. So yeah, mom fail there. But yes, asking them yes or no questions. So like in the morning with breakfast, I don't say, what do you want for breakfast? It's, do you want a waffle? Do you want eggs? Do you want a protein shake? And letting them answer yes or no in that way. All right, moving on to manifestors. For manifestors, it feels like it's like the total opposite. My oldest is a manifestor, and they do really well when you ask them open-ended questions. Not so much yes or no. Remember, they don't have that sacral response. They are, quote, non-sacral being, right? So ask open-ended questions and let them find their ideas, because that's literally how they're designed to initiate in the world, right? Is they like download and channel their ideas, get really excited about them, and then they want to take action. I'd also say giving them space and independence. Do not try to control manifestors. It's like the worst thing in the world to them. I mean, no one wants to be controlled, but manifestors are literally designed to be like super independent and super autonomous. So let them have their alone time. Let them go do their things that they're obsessing about. And it's not that they don't want you around. It's that they're kind of built to be like this lone wolf, to just get really excited about the things that they want to do, and want that, or maybe they just want that alone time to figure out what they want to be creatively inspired about and give them that space. Asking too many questions, trying to like force your way into their head or force your way into their circle can come across as controlling to them too. So just be there to support them, and let them know that like, yeah, I just want to be like kept in the loop, right? With whatever decisions you make that are going to affect me, and give them their autonomy. Let them do what they feel like they need to do. They also don't love receiving advice. So this can be tricky if you're a projector and all you want to do is give advice. So that's where literally your voice and communication is going to be really extra important. Um, as a manifestor too, I feel like when you build up those healthy communication styles, that you feel so much more open and welcoming of receiving advice. It tends to be more like when you are feeling controlled, any advice that's given to you or sent your way just feels like extra annoying and makes you just angry, right? So how can you create that energetic alignment? Like in one of my masterminds, there's 5 of us, and we actually have every single type within the human design system in this mastermind, which is like the best. And so we have a manifester. And when she shows up and she tells us what's going on, you can feel that she is open to what we're saying, because it's like that almost like level playing field where she understands that we are there to support, not push. There's no controlling, right? So it's as long as everything's on like a healthy, energetic balance, and you talk about things and you communicate, then it's totally safe to give advice and probably ask if they want your advice, right? Um, last thing actually, no, 2 more things I want to note about that. If you are a manifester, you can feel angry with other people's lack of speed and productivity. Remember that you are more fast paced than the majority of the world. So remember, not everyone operates like you. And if you have someone in your life who's a manifestor, let them have their speed and remind them that you are not built the same way, right? And manifestors can also go through that rest cycle. So, in that rest cycle, they might feel like they're not finding any creative inspiration. They might feel like they're like just constantly tired, or feeling like laziness is like a trigger word for them, right? So, if you're able to catch and see someone, a manifestor who's in like a rest cycle, you can encourage them to rest and encourage them that it's safe to rest, right? And that creative inspiration will hit when the time is right. Now, if you have a child who's a manifestor, she's been one of my biggest learning curves, I would say, with human design, because, as a manifestor child, they are very independent and they want to do what they want to do, right? There's like no telling her no. She's like, but why? This is what I feel in my body that I need to go do right now, right? So, how do you let kids run with their wild ideas and provide autonomy while also keeping them safe? Some examples with my 10-year-old. Did I say she was 9 earlier? She just turned 10 recently. She loves to play with everything in the kitchen. Like, she loves baking and pretending she's cooking. So ever since she was a toddler, she always wanted to like go through my spice cabinet and take out all the bowls and start making potions or soups or whatever. And I would get so annoyed because I'm like, you're wasting all my spices. You're trashing my kitchen. You're not even washing your dishes, because she was like fucking tiny at the time, right? But it was still annoying because it was all this cleanup I had to do. And now I find ways to give her boundaries while also letting her do that. So, like, one of the boundaries is she cleans up her mess, right? And then I will tend to, not always, but tend to tell her which spices she can use and what she can't. So I can also keep an eye on, like, what am I going to run out of now? And making sure that, like, she has that safety structure in place for anything that she wants to run and do and just like explode on, right? If I never taught her to clean up after herself or to wrap up her projects, literally my entire house would just have like paper and cut up cardboard and glue and crafts and pretend soup mixtures and spices everywhere. I'm not even kidding. Like, this girl cuts up everything and makes like paper houses, and it's just ridiculous. Like, there would be so much trash everywhere. Well, I shouldn't say trash because they are her creative treasures, but you moms know what I'm talking about, right? So that's the first thing I would say about having them as children. And also the obvious, what I said earlier, of asking them open-ended questions. Moving into projectors, ask them to share their advice. Literally invite them to tap into their gifts, ask what they see, ask, what they would do differently, how they could make things more efficient. What are your blind spots, right? Like, that's a projector's gift, is to see the blind spots. And they're literally dying to tell you what it is that they see, right? They are so good at giving advice and seeing how to fix problems, right? But their strategy, the way they're designed to interact with the world around them, is called waiting for the invitation. So if they give their advice and share their wisdom and try to fix a problem when someone is not open to receiving that problem being fixed, that's where it creates that not self-themed bitterness, and typically on both ends, right? So if you know someone who is a projector, ask them to share what they see. They really want to. And if you are a projector, ask people if they want your advice or if they just want you to listen, right? Especially when people tend to like project onto you all their problems, and like, you have that fixer energy. So you can literally say, do you want me to share what I see, or do you just need me to listen right now? Because both are okay. A lot of times we do need that sounding board just to be there so we can get something off our chest. I did this earlier today in my mastermind. I was like, guys, I just like, this is like word vomit. I just need to get it out so that I feel better, right? And there was no one trying to fix anything. They just held that space. So that's important too. But remember to ask. It's a saving grace for your own energy. It's not just about human design. It's not just about like, because I told you so. Like, this is literally going to save so much energy of yours, so much of that very, very strong sense into another aura kind of energy. How else would we support projectors? Let them rest, especially if like you're in a marriage or a relationship or one of your kids, maybe you guys are a very active family, but maybe one or two of you is a non-sacral, like a projector or a reflector or a manifestor, and just feels tired and just wants to sleep. Let them rest. Remember, they're not designed to go, go, go all the time. And help them turn their brain off, whether it's with a puzzle, turn on a trashy TV show. Sometimes, that's okay. It's not like it's going to kill you, but, go for a hike, get into yoga if that feels nourishing, something to really turn their brain off. Now, if you are a parent or a caregiver of someone who is a projector, ask your kids to share their insights on a situation. Especially like dinner table conversation. If they're talking about how their school day was, ask them what they would have done differently about something. Or you can tell them about your day and let them strengthen that muscle. Tell them something that happened with you and say, what would you have done differently in this situation? Or what do you see that I'm not like that I'm missing about a situation that happened with you? They really want to share. So give them that safe space to share what they see. Let them feel seen and heard and recognized for their gifts, because that's going to just nurture their energy even more. All right, now reflectors. I reached out to my two of my reflector friends and clients to ask for advice on this one, because reflectors are only 1% of the population. So I only know what I've learned from education and from working with and listening to reflectors, and that's not as much as every other type, right? So thankfully, we have some straight from the source reflector magic coming through on this one too. With reflectors, give them time to make decisions. They are lunar beings. They run on 28-day decision-making cycles. Let them take their time. That's how they are designed to move through life, is to just take their time to feel into a situation, to prepare for something. Let them just move at whatever pace feels good for them. And, if you're a reflector, how can you allow more of that space in your life instead of pressure around decisions, right? How can you prioritize giving yourself that time? Maybe it's planning further ahead than you normally do and getting that to be a priority in your life. I would also say letting them lean on you during their decision-making process if they feel they need to, because they are cycling through the energies all through their centers, right? And sometimes they need to test and sample the energies of another. They need to process what it is that you see that they're talking about, right? And it's not necessarily about giving them advice. Maybe it is just about reflecting back what they're talking about, what they're feeling and sensing, right? Sometimes they do feel like they need to lean on people a little bit when they're making decisions or moving through something. So let them, without that codependent energy going on and without trying to force your perspective on them, I hope that makes sense. Now, reflectors also have like a predictive energy about them. They tend to, it's got to be all their openness. They tend to like sense things that are going to happen. And I've heard this from a number of, no, sorry, not projectors, reflectors over the years. I actually tend to see this a lot too in someone having like a lot of openness in their chart as well. So hold space for them if they're feeling like something is going to happen, instead of being like, no, you're fine, or no, that can't be, whatever. Like just trust in what they're sensing and help them strengthen that sense. You can, of course, emotionally support them through that, especially if they're feeling triggered and having a reaction that doesn't necessarily feel good for their nervous system. Then absolutely support them in whatever ways you can, but also allowing them to harness that predictive type of energy, harness that sense, or those senses, I should say, and believe in them. Let them let them share that with you. Create that safe space for them to share that with you is essentially what I'm trying to say. Now, if you have a reflector like on your team or in your family, like begin to see them as like the temperature check. Ask them about how they find their environment, how they feel about home life. Like their intuitive insights and their read on people can be extremely accurate because that's what they're here to do is reflect back the general health and stability of the world around them. That's literally what they're designed to do, right? So especially if you have one like on your team environment at work, ask them for the temperature check on their work environment. And chances are, whatever they're feeling or sensing or whatever's uncomfortable, maybe something actually feels really good, that's a perfect representation of the overall environment that they're typically in. If you are a reflector, prioritize finding spaces that hold this energy for you, like spaces that feel good, where you feel like you can lean on people for decision guidance, where you feel like you can allow your predictive senses to come through, where it's safe to say things that you are feeling are coming up in your environment, right? The environment piece is going to be really important for you. Put yourself in those situations that hold that energy for you. And it's like a foundation to thrive when you do that. If you are a parent of a reflector or a caregiver of a reflector, some things that came through from my clients was giving them space to think on something and allow themselves to understand how they want to respond. Because we are so used to, what's the term I'm looking for? Instant gratification, right? So we want like, especially we want our kids to tell us, well, what do you want to do right now? Like, what do you need? What is this? What is that? Give them more space and time. Just like you would for a reflector adult, give them the space and time. They're no different just because they're a child, right? Having that lunar magic doesn't, I mean, you can't wait 28 days for everything, but how can you let things click on a little bit more over time before they respond to you? Give them that space. Give them space to breathe if you're looking for an answer or you're asking them something, right? And then remember that they are reflecting everything back. So emotional awareness and conversations about feeling good, good feeling energy, bad feeling energy. How can you help them relate to the energies they're feeling and have like good energetic hygiene? How can you help them understand that some energies are going to be around, feel icky, and some energies are going to feel great, and that sometimes that energy doesn't belong to them and they can release it or let it go? There's all different ways that you could touch on this depending on the age of the child. Like with my 5-year-old, she's not a reflector, but she does have a good amount of openness and she feels very strongly. So we've had a lot of emotional awareness work we've done with her, and she knows things like tapping. She knows how to tap and use emotional freedom technique, right? So there are ways you can teach this to little kids, like little kids, even if they're not 10 or 11 and can pick up on that kind of language easily. All right, I feel like that was everything I needed to say there. I think so. So I hope you found this helpful. I hope maybe you send this to your spouse or your partner or your work partner, right? Like these are great tools that we can use in everyday life all the time, in any relationship that we have, right? Whether you're a parent or you have a colleague at work that you're struggling with, like, can we look at their human design and see how we can better navigate this situation? If you have any questions at all, feel free to just reach out, probably on Instagram. Instagram's the easiest. My email responder is literally like, I don't always feel like getting back to email. So yeah, Instagram would be the best. And I'd love to hear your reflections too. If you've used any of this information and advice in your own relationships, how it's working for you. Maybe you're doing something different that's working for you. I'd love to hear all of that. Remember, I'm a manifesting generator, so I can understand things on an energetic level as a manifesting generator does. And I just keep collecting information from all these other types in order to teach. So it's really helpful when you give me feedback. I really, really love that and appreciate it. And of course, if there's anything you want to hear on the podcast that I haven't touched on yet, I always look for things to respond to. So send that in as well. And if I've already done an episode on it, then I'll just find it and shoot it your way. All right. I love you so much. I will see you next week.